Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh with Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. Lots to talk about here for the upcoming week, and we are going to see a more active weather pattern farther south and east as we see kind of just a blast of cold air, which I'm speechless because we really haven't had those recently across the eastern United States coming later on in the week next week. And that will lead to an increase in winter storm chances for the mid-Atlantic into the Northeast, it looks like at this point, although that is still up for some debate as there's still some uncertainty, of course, a week out. But certainly things are going to be changing for us here after a very warm week. Right now, from the National Weather Service, most of the weather ongoing is across the Southwest and especially in California. We have winter storm warnings for much of the state of California, except right along the coastline where we have flash flood watches, and blizzard warnings continue for the southern mountains of California, as well as the southern Sierra Nevada and even parts of the state of Nevada, and also into parts of northern Montana. So a very big winter storm moving into the U.S. By way of California here this week and into the weekend, and that is going to track into the plains over the end of the weekend and move into the Northeast next week, following with a second storm, which looks like it'll take a more southern track, and that is going to bring us some cooler, more unsettled weather down to the Gulf Coast region and break up our heat wave that we've been in. It is very warm out there still here in the Southeast with morning temperatures in the 60s and low 70s, even up to 60 degrees in DC, but there is a front moving through the region, so you can see cooler weather dropping down, and the second front bringing much colder temperatures to the snowpack of Minnesota and Wisconsin, where we have temperatures this morning of 10 to 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. That cold is starting to move back into Pennsylvania and southern New England and will be with us through the weekend and is going to set the stage for a more wintry storm track here as we head on into next week. Looking back across the center of the country, you can see that very cold air is in place. So it is still winter for many folks. And we're just not seeing it yet on the Gulf Coast and in the Southeast, but that is going to change here in about a week or so. And then out west, we definitely have some extreme cold temperatures with 30s and 40s across California, teens and 20s in the mountains. In the Northwest, it's very cold. We're looking at teens and low 20s. Along the I-5 corridor, single digits in the mountains, and well below zero weather across the interior of the Northwest. So very cold air is in place, and we're going to see some shifting coming here in the next couple of weeks. The Arctic Oscillation, this indicates kind of where the polar air has been positive for a while. That's why we haven't been able to see extreme amounts of cold dropping south. That is expected to start to flip as we head towards the end of next week and will be negative most likely here for much of the following week. So March is going to come in like a lion as we see that flip in temperatures with the colder air moving across into the Western Hemisphere. The Eastern Pacific Oscillation, which is negative now, is going to go more to positive, and that is going to bring milder air into the West later next week, and that will allow colder air to spill down into the eastern United States for several days. The NAO, which has been positive, that is the region of high pressure over Greenland, is going to go negative. So that is also going to set up the possibility for cold air to drop down into the eastern United States here next week in several waves, and it will stay negative, it looks like, into the following week. And then finally, the PNA is negative, and that it does get less negative, but it does not guarantee cold air for the Southeast with this. This is definitely still mild along the Gulf Coast, but some trending back as we get more into the middle parts of the month of March, some trending back towards a more neutral, meaning that, believe it or not, the warm weather we're having now in the Southeast isn't necessarily going to stick around all of March. In fact, it may be heading in the direction more favorable for some colder air in place. So you all can see on the European, very warm in the Southeast, very cold in the North. As we head into the weekend, it'll be quite cold across New England, but warming back up in the eastern United States early next week. This is Monday and Tuesday. However, as we head later into next week, we see this advancement of colder air coming in around Thursday, and that starts to spread into the southern plains and Texas. And by the end of the week, a colder weather pattern for the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. And this is going to likely set up a battle zone here off the Carolina coast and up the East Coast, which is something that we haven't really seen in the last few weeks. but will certainly set the stage for what could be a more active storm track here up the East Coast, or at least out to sea here across the mid-Atlantic, but clipping the Northeast. And that is what you want to see if you're a winter weather fan. Here's where temperatures have gone over the last 24 hours. It's turned much colder here across Pennsylvania and parts of the Mid-South, but warming right back up in the interior of the West. We will see these chillier temperatures staying in place here tomorrow, and a much colder day across the South Atlantic states. We're running the air conditioning right now here where I live in Raleigh. We will probably be running the heat tomorrow. So a big flip in temperatures coming, but that's not going to last too long as it warms right back up here early next week. Here's Sunday night, and here's Monday into Tuesday, and we see the next storm moves eastward from the central part of the country into the east, cooling off here Tuesday into Wednesday. Warming back up, though, but then a bigger shot of cooler weather coming to the eastern United States towards the end of next week, and by the beginning of the following weekend. It looks like it may finally cool off in Florida as we get to the start of next weekend. So a very active storm pattern expected, but not before we have another day of record warmth across the southeast. It is cooler in the Carolinas and certainly in Tennessee and Virginia today. We're dropping into the 50s and 60s, except down near Wilmington, we may sneak back to 80 degrees for just one more day. But look at tomorrow. We go from the 70s to the 40s in places like Raleigh and Greensboro, and even mid to upper 30s in Maryland across the Delmarva and the Delaware Valley here. And there may be some wintry weather tomorrow in parts of the mid-Atlantic region. It's not going to be a lot, but it will be some. However, the cold does not make it all the way down south of Atlanta. We're still well into the 80s and even maybe 90 degrees in parts of southwestern and west central Florida. We bounce back on Sunday. It warms right back up. Monday is a warm day across the east. This looks a lot like it did a few days ago. Tuesday still warm. Wednesday starting to cool down. Thursday still warm, but there is colder air on the way. And I'll show you the central part of the country here. You'll notice that it is warming up here quite a bit into the upper Midwest Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And we may see close to 50 in Chicago on Wednesday, but starting to cool off on Thursday. And Friday and Saturday is when the cooling really starts to take place. And the National Weather Service does not have a forecast chart for that just yet, but we are going to talk about it more here. All right, so GFS Ensemble showing a big chance for snow here in the west here in the next 24 hours, and a weaker storm moving across the Great Lakes here Friday night into Saturday. And notice there is the potential on some of the ensembles for a small amount of snow falling here in the mid-Atlantic states. It's not going to be much, but it may be close to as much as we've seen this winter, which isn't really saying much. Now, as we get into early next week, we see a bigger storm. Sorry about that. See a bigger storm dropping south and east, kind of like a Clipper storm, but it looks like it picks up some steam over southern New England. And Monday night and Tuesday, we could have a significant storm across much of New England, and that will move out of here by early Wednesday. So while the mid-Atlantic region does not see anything but probably rain out of this, the interior of the Northeast and New England once again sees a pretty significant snow. But for a change, this will include Rhode Island, Connecticut, Long Island, and southeastern Mass, which have gotten the mixing line to your west most of the winter. We will see that changing. Sorry, I don't know what's in my throat here. But we definitely see colder, more wintry weather here across southern New England by Tuesday. Another storm moves into the west, another big snow for California and southern Oregon. And you'll see the snow line starts dropping south and southeastward and perhaps gets into Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas by the end of next week. And some of the ensembles cut this up through the Great Lakes like we've seen so many times, but quite a few are going to drop it farther south and east, as you guys can see here, into the mid-Atlantic region on Friday night and maybe up the East Coast here on Saturday. So this is more than we've seen in many model runs here across the mid-Atlantic and into the big cities in the Northeast. But again, it's a week out, so a lot can change. Let's look at the operational model. This is the GFS from Pivotal Weather. You can see the cold air seeps into the eastern United States. There is a disturbance that moves through the Carolinas and some light wintry precipitation over Maryland, South Jersey, and Philly here. This would be tomorrow morning and around lunchtime. Big storm in Southern California moving out into the plains. Sunday night, we'll see severe weather across the southern plains. It looks like North Texas up into Kansas. That moves northeastward and brings heavy rain up into Illinois and Wisconsin. It runs into colder air over northern Wisconsin and Michigan, where there could be some ice. This will be farther north than the last storm. and then that moves eastward across Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And with colder air hanging on here in the Northeast, we will likely see significant snowfall across the Boston and Providence areas and in southern Maine. And that will start here, it looks like Monday night, and continue into Tuesday morning and develop a more coastal low. And the slower that development happens, the longer the snow could be around before any potential mixing on the island. So maybe a big snowfall here Monday into Tuesday in New England. That moves out, and we have a quieter weather pattern before our next storm moves into California Tuesday night and Wednesday. That's going to take a far southern track and mean heavier rain returns to parts of the deep south here by Thursday, and maybe even a bit of snow over North Texas and Oklahoma, depending on how this all plays out. But you can see there's a cold air mass over eastern Canada on Friday and low pressure over the southeast moving up towards the northeast. And this model is more extreme with the cold wrapping in here into the Carolinas and Virginia, but shows what could be a significant snowfall on the East Coast here by Saturday of next weekend, if this track is right. Now, that's not a guarantee yet. It's still 7 to 8 days out, but it's definitely showing that storm signal, and this could be a significant storm for some if this track holds up. Now, the European is kind of on a different exact storm track, but shows all these storms moving across. The Euro has a huge snowstorm here for parts of southern New England and even just north of New York City here on Monday night, Tuesday morning, but it's faster to move out. The next storm, as it moves through the Gulf states, does not draw in enough cold air for snow in Texas and Oklahoma. It's more progressive, but it runs into eastern Tennessee and the western Carolinas and Virginia and could produce more of an ice event with mountain snow. This looks a little bit more like that storm a couple weekends ago that was elevational. However, that storm track is south. It's just more progressive. So this track does not come up the East Coast. It kind of clips the mid-Atlantic with cold rain and maybe a little bit of wintry mix or sleet mixing in. So again, it is not sold on what the GFS is showing at this point. The Canadian model, again, agrees on a big snowfall here in New England, but it has mixing south of Boston going over to rain. So it does not have a big snow for southern New England here Tuesday morning. However, it has a decent sized snow for Maine and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So it misses the boat. It looks like a lot of the other storms we've had. It does have a storm crossing Pennsylvania and the Great Lakes here on Thursday, maybe producing a light snow again across southern New England, but it has a pretty decent storm that gets held up here over Texas and leads to more of a wintry mix here across western Oklahoma and heavy snow event across New Mexico and northwest Texas. So the Canadian was faster, more progressive, and did not wrap the cold air in. The GFS was in between the two, and the Canadian model shows what could be a winter storm here across the southern and central plains, and then cutting up into the northeast. And this could be significant for New York City and Philly, and certainly Allentown and Reading, and then spreading eastward. Wherever this low goes is where the snow could go. It may go out to sea and mean we get missed in New England, or it may try to come up the coast and produce significant snow for New York City and eastern PA. Again, it's a week out, but the signal is there for a significant storm in the south at the end of next week, around this time next week, and then moving potentially to the mid-Atlantic, maybe the northeast here over the weekend. So lots to talk about in our future videos for sure. Let's look at this weekend here in the Northeast, though. This is kind of a sneaky storm spreading Saturday morning, that's tomorrow morning, into New York State, northern Pennsylvania. We also have a wintry mix here over the Blue Ridge of West Virginia and Virginia, and a little bit of sleet and snow over the Shenandoah Valley. It's not going to drop much, but it could cause some slippery spots here for Saturday morning and then midday Saturday around DC. So it was 80 degrees in DC yesterday. Today, we're dropping into the 50s. Tomorrow, we're in the mid-30s with wet snowflakes. Probably not going to amount to much, but it is something. And it may be something to see snow falling tomorrow afternoon over blooming trees, over blooming cherry blossoms and redbuds. So it could be very interesting here. But that heads out. It warms up a little bit here. And the next storm on the Euro is more liquid for this region, but it's snow across New England and especially Connecticut into the interior parts of New England. Potentially could be a very treacherous morning commute for some of you here on Tuesday morning. It could be wicked nasty out there. There's my New England's coming through. And then that moves northward and lifts up into Maine and New Hampshire. Significant snow Tuesday evening and then ending Wednesday morning. And I'm not going to show you anything beyond that at this point because we already showed you that. But here's the European: big snow in the west, and then a minor snow here in the northeast and mid-Atlantic here heading into Saturday evening. and then up into Maine and southeastern Quebec. Next storm moves through the upper Midwest and could produce heavy snowfall over Wisconsin and Michigan with some sleet and freezing rain mixing in on the southern part of this. But look at New England here. We do have definitely a significant snowfall to look at, with amounts potentially getting up close to a foot, according to the European here, in the interior parts of southern and central New England, maybe even 4 or 5 inches around Boston, and 6 to 8 inches around Providence and Tolland, Connecticut, and Willimantic. Even New York City could see a quick inch of snow out of this, but I think most of that will be north and east of the city. But it'll be something at least. And then that moves out. And then the next storm moves in Thursday night into Friday and looks like a similar path, but a little bit farther west and more farther inland. And then here's the weekend storm. According to the European, it's farther south. And I'll take you down there. And you'll see, sorry, that's this weekend. Let's look at next weekend. You'll see that the European has this back across the mountains of the Carolinas and southern Virginia, which should look familiar for those of us that got fooled into thinking that was going to be the case a couple weekends ago. But this shows snow all the way down to Raleigh and Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Suffolk and Emporia. And I don't know if I believe this at this point because this is the European model. The Canadian's not in this far, but the Canadian's farther north across the Mid-Atlantic region, and shows some snow in eastern Pennsylvania and tracking to New York City Sunday morning, but mainly moving into New England. That's a familiar storm track for us. But the GFS has a pretty decent whopper of a storm. So the European is down across the Carolinas and Virginia and eastern Tennessee. The Canadian is moving up into New England. And then here we go, I don't want to call it consensus, but the average of the models is the GFS going right between the two. And that shows a big whopper of a storm here Friday night and Saturday in the Mid-Atlantic states. So stay tuned. The signal is there certainly for potential significant snow for somebody. Let's shift gears and look at the severe weather threat. We do have an enhanced risk for Sunday afternoon and evening, especially in Oklahoma. That includes Frederick, Lawton, Edmond, Oklahoma City and Norman, and surrounding that area is a slight risk down to close to Dallas-Fort Worth and Abilene, Texas, and then all the way up into central parts of Kansas. That could shift east into Monday. Right now, there is a slight risk Monday, but it's farther east across eastern Tennessee and Kentucky. Again, not a super certain chance for severe weather, but there is that possibility. And beyond that, the Storm Prediction Center doesn't have a chance for enough of a severe weather outbreak, but I wouldn't be shocked if Thursday and Friday we saw more severe weather, but farther south over southeast Texas and the central Gulf states, and maybe even sneaking into Florida here by the end of next week. And here's why. You see a pretty good closed low off the California coast. That's what's crushing those mountains with heavy snow here in southern Cal. That is going to spread eastward and move across the southern and central plains. And you can see very fast winds aloft over Oklahoma here. This would be right around midnight Sunday night, and then spreading east and weakening with time into the Ohio Valley. But with daytime heating, we still have some fast flow aloft over eastern Kentucky and Tennessee. So something to watch for. But that is going to move into colder air and broaden. That trough will broaden by Tuesday and produce lift across New England. Behind it, we have another big storm moving into California here on Wednesday. This is taking a deeper track farther south and down all the way into central and south Texas here. So watch out around Houston and in Louisiana for Friday. Again, this can change, but watch out. And then that moves eastward across the southeastern states, and this favors South Carolina, Georgia, and northern Florida with potential severe weather at the end of the week if this track is correct. But again, that's a ways out. So I did want to show you the significant tornado parameter on the NAM, and it's not super high, but it does have the potential for a tornado or two, which could be strong across western Oklahoma here in the evening Sunday night, and then starting to move into central Oklahoma and Kansas later Sunday evening, and then into western Missouri and southeast Kansas and northwest Arkansas late at night Sunday night. But we're losing some of the moisture at that point. You'll see the radar as well as we head on into the weekend. This is the NAM model. Shows what should be initiation of a dry line here late Sunday afternoon in West Texas, the panhandle of Oklahoma, and western Kansas. And then that spreads northeastward into western and central Oklahoma. So this is, this is the area I'd be most concerned with potential tornadoes west of Oklahoma City. And then as that moves eastward, it blossoms into rain and scattered thunderstorms and maybe a few severe storms in parts of Missouri. And then lightning flashes from the European, you can see it's going to be pretty busy here Sunday night across this part of the region, especially over North Texas and Southwest Oklahoma. And then things will quiet down, and I'll move you eastward a little bit here so that you can see parts of the Ohio Valley here. And we do have the potential for scattered supercells over parts of eastern Tennessee and eastern Kentucky, maybe sneaking into West Virginia here early in the afternoon on Monday, and then falling apart when it hits the mountains here Monday evening. So that's what I'll be watching for you all as we get into next week. I apologize I ran a little bit late here on this video, but I appreciate y'all's time. Please like and subscribe. We're going to have a lot to talk about next week, and it will include snow in places that are in a snow drought, I believe, personally, but I can't give you the exact numbers and details just yet. That's what we're going to have a chance to take more look at here for next week. So I appreciate your time today, and I want to just thank you and thank God for allowing me to do this video. And I want to read a quick passage that just tells me why I want to thank God, and that's Ephesians 2:8. God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we've done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. God called me to be a meteorologist and to share my faith as well. And this is how I'm serving him, and he's given me the gift of salvation through his son, Jesus Christ. I pray that you have a gift from God as well, that you believe in him, and that you see that that gift is there, that we cannot take credit for, but it is something that has been gifted to us from God. That means a lot to me personally, and I'm happy to pray for you if you have any prayer requests, but I appreciate your time today. Hope you all have a great Friday. Talk to you in the morning. God bless you.